October 15th, 1944. The Vosges Mountains in northeastern France, a tangled fortress of dripping pines and fog-veiled ridges where the relentless rain turned earth to sucking mire, and every breath carried the chill promise of trench foot. Private First Class Barney Hajiro, a lean 25-year-old Nisei from Hawaii's cane fields, now clad in sweat-soaked summer fatigues that offered no shield against the 40-degree damp, gripped his M1 Garand rifle tighter as a Nebelwerfer rocket, one of those shrieking German screaming mimes, with its 6 tubular launchers spewing 28-pound high-explosive warheads, howled overhead and detonated in a shower of splintered oak and razor-sharp shrapnel. The blast wave slammed him against a root-choked embankment, ears ringing like fractured bells, while the acrid stench of burning powder clawed his throat. At his flank, Technical Sergeant Joe Nishimoto, a Fresno-born farm boy, whose parents languished behind Manzanar's barbed wire under Executive Order 9066, spat a glob of mud and chambered around, his Thompson submachine gun, that stubby 45 caliber beast with its 20-round box magazine slung low for the hip-fire frenzy ahead. These second-generation Japanese Americans, volunteers and draftees, forged into the 442nd Regimental Combat Team amid a nation's wartime paranoia, charged into the maelstrom not just for glory, but to shatter the slur of disloyalty that had stripped their families of homes and dignity. The 442nd's odyssey to this verdant hell began months earlier, a segregated saga born of irony and iron will. Activated in February 1943 at Camp Shelby, Mississippi, the unit swelled to 3,500 men by blending Hawaii's battle-hardened 100th Infantry Battalion, already dubbed the Purple Heart Battalion for bleeding through Italy's Casino cliffs, with mainland recruits from internment camps like Hart Mountain and Tule Lake. Their white officers, led by Colonel Virgil R. Miller, navigated a minefield of prejudice. Pentagon memos fretted over Oriental unreliability, while fellow GIs in the 36th Infantry Division eyed them warily, whispers of Pearl Harbor still fresh. Yet the Nisei's motto, "Go for broke," Hawaiian slang for all-or-nothing stakes, pulsed like a heartbeat, a vow to prove their American blood ran as red as any. By September, after a Mediterranean detour, they disembarked at Marseille in boxcars reeking of manure, a bitter echo of the assembly centers that herded their kin westward. Attached to Major General John E. Dahlquist's 36th Division, on October 13th they faced the Vosges, ancient peaks unbreached since Caesar, now a Nazi redoubt where Hitler's 19th Army, some 20,000 mountain troops with MG-42 machine guns chewing at 1,200 rounds per minute, clung to ridges laced with shoe mine, 42 bounding mines that leaped chest-high before erupting in steel hail. Bruyères, a medieval crossroads of stone bridges and timbered homes, was the gateway. Its fall would unhinge the Belfort Gap and propel the 7th Army toward the Rhine. Dahlquist, a tactician schooled in the Rapido River's carnage, promised light resistance, but intelligence from Nisei linguists in Company S painted a grimmer canvas. German paratroopers and grenadiers, veterans of the Eastern Front, dug into pine-camouflaged bunkers with interlocking fields of fire from 88mm flak guns, their tungsten rounds punching through tree trunks like hot knives. At 0800 hours on the 15th, under a rolling barrage from the 522nd Field Artillery Battalion's 105mm howitzers, 19-caliber projectiles fused for tree burst to rain wooden shrapnel, the 100th Battalion lunged at Hill A, a mud-slick dome rising 400 feet above the town. Hajiro in the 2nd platoon felt his pulse thunder at 160 beats per minute as adrenaline, that flood of norepinephrine sharpening vision to hawk keen, propelled him through ferns tripped with concertina wire. A Spandau nest, the water-jacketed predecessor to the Hitler saw, chattered from 50 yards, its 7mm rounds stitching the slope. Private Tatsuro Inuye crumpled beside him, throat torn open in a crimson froth, his final gasp bubbling sulfur powder from the medic's hasty compress. The assault devolved into primal chaos. Nisei crawled yard by yard, lobbing M17 fragmentation grenades, those pineapple casings fragmenting into 2,000 steel nuggets, into slits where loaders fed belts into glowing barrels. Nishimoto, eyes slitted against the mist, squeezed his Thompson's trigger in controlled bursts, the recoil a familiar thud against his shoulder as .45 slugs hammered a gun crew into silence. By dusk, after 12 hours and 500 yards of advance, Hille crested under Nisei boots, but counterattacks probed the flanks. German potato masher, steel hand granite 43 grenades, porcelain-handled TNT charges with serrated casings arced from the gloom, erupting in geysers that flayed flesh from bone. Psychological barbs compounded the physical. In captured dugouts, Nisei found scrawled leaflets mocking yellow mercenaries, echoes of Berlin's racial propaganda that branded them as American desperation's dregs. Yet resolve hardened like bayonet steel. Hajiro, bandaging a shrapnel gash on his calf with adhesive tape and a sulfur packet, murmured to Nishimoto, "For Ma and Pa, they call us Japs, but we'll bleed Texan today." The 100th tallied 12 dead and 86 wounded that day alone, their foxholes, shallow scrapes roofed with ponchos, alive with the moans of men fighting gangrene's creep in sodden wool. October 16th dawned in sleet, the 2nd Battalion wheeling right against Hill B, while the 100th consolidated. Engineers from the 232nd Company bridged shell-cratered streams with Bailey sections, portable steel trusses bolted under fire. But Luftwaffe spotters, lurking in Focke-Wulf 190A8s with their radial engines droning at 2,000 feet, vectored Stuka dive bombers, gull-winged Ju-87Bs, sirens wailing like damned souls as 500-pound bombs cratered the advance. Company F, under First Sergeant Jack Wakamatsu, flanked a Panther tank, that 45-ton slab of sloped armor mounting a 75mm KWK-42 cannon, with bazookas, the 2.36-inch rocket-propelled grenades streaking in hollow charge fury to brew up the turret in oily flame. By the 17th, after a 30-minute drumfire from 40 field pieces, the Nisei stormed the hills, bayonets fixed in vengeful ritual, the 16-inch Bowie blades glinting as they overran bunkers in hand-to-claw melees, where rifle butts splintered helmets and entrenching tools parried thrusts. Bruyères fell on the 18th, its streets a charnel house of twisted Mauser K980 carbiner rifles and Nisei litters lashed from saplings. But the toll mounted, over 250 casualties, medics like Private Kazuo Takemoto, dashing through crossfires with morphine syrettes and plasma bottles, their armbands crimsoned by ignored conventions. No breath came. Dahlquist, eyes alight with the Rhine's mirage, vectored the battered 442nd at Bifontaine 5 miles east. A tactical footnote, its farmhouses booby-trapped with Sauerstoffkerzen oxygen candles that whooshed into holocausts. The 100th plunged in on the 19th house-to-house savagery against 200 grenadiers who counterattacked thrice, even mounting their own bayonet rush on the 22nd, only to shatter on Nisei machine guns. Private First Class Ichigi Kashiwagi, in an oral history later archived by the Go for Broke National Education Center, recalled the strain. "We yelled our heads off and shot the head off everything that moved. We didn't care anymore." By the 23rd, Bifontaine smoked in Nisei hands, but exhaustion gnawed, trench foot swelled feet to purple balloons, K rations of Spam and hard candy turned to glue in bellies unused to sleep. Then catastrophe. The 1st Battalion, 141st Infantry, 275 cocky Texans from the National Guard, relieved them only to overextend into a pocket, ringed by 6,000 Germans with Nebelwerfers zeroed on their foxholes. Radio please crackled, "God damn it, send help!" Dahlquist's gaze fixed on the 442nd, his voice over the field wire a whip. Rescue them, at all costs. As the Nisei shouldered packs into the gloaming of October 24th, fog cloaking the ravines like a shroud, distant German spotters, peering through Zeiss binoculars from concrete Auswachs, murmured dismissals of these Asian curiosities, but the Vosges shadows hid a storm gathering, bayonets wetted for rebuttal in blood and thunder. October 24th, 1944. The Vosges shadowed ravines near Bifontaine, where the fog clung like a funeral pall, and the first winter sleet stung exposed skin like needles from the pines overhead. Sergeant Takeo Ito, a stocky 30-year-old Nisei from California's strawberry fields, now scarred from Anzio's beaches where he'd earned his sergeant's stripes silencing a nest of MG-34 machine guns with his Browning automatic rifle, that 20-pound 30-caliber beast fed by 20-round magazines, wiped condensation from his bayonet's edge and scanned the tree line. His company, remnants of the 100th Battalion's Company B, huddled in a rain-lashed draw, 87 men, gaunt from 21 days of ceaseless slog, their wool field blouses chafing raw sores from trench foot, while K-ration crackers crumbled in pockets like futile talismans against hunger. Above them, the lost battalion, 275 Texans of the 141st Infantry, encircled in a mile-wide pocket of sheer cliffs and German wire, clung to foxholes rationed to 1 D-ration chocolate bar per day, their radios crackling pleas amid the whine of incoming 81mm mortar rounds from the 933rd Grenadier Regiment. Ito's jaw clenched at the memory of Dahlquist's order, relayed via runner in the gloaming, "Push through hell if you must, those boys are family." But to the Nisei, family meant the ghosts of Manzanar and the sneers of white GIs who dubbed them Tokyo Joes. This charge was reclamation, bayonets drawn not just for Texans, but for a nation's fractured soul. The march to the pocket had been a gauntlet of its own, launched at dusk on the 24th under a moonless sky where visibility shrank to 10 yards in the murk. The 442nd, 3,000 strong but frayed to 2,000 effectives after Bruyere, snaked through switchback trails mined with Teller anti-tank charges, those hexagonal steel plates packing 5,000 grams of TNT buried to gut jeeps and men alike. German Fallschirmjäger paratroopers, those elite glider troops in splinter-pattern smocks blending with the ferns, picked at the flanks with scoped Kar 980 carbiner rifles, their 7.92mm rounds cracking like dry lightning to drop point men in sprays of arterial mist. Private Barney Hajiro, his shoulder throbbing from a shrapnel kiss patched with sulfur and adhesive tape, humped his bar forward, the weapon's bipod slapping his thigh like a metronome of dread. Psychological tempests raged. Whispers of "Why us again" clashed with the steel of "Go for broke," that pigeon creed echoing from Hawaiian cane cutters who'd volunteered at 10-to-1 rates despite the draft's racist barbs. Intelligence scraps gleaned from a captured Gefreiter whose Walter pistol now warmed Ito's belt painted the foe, 6,000 defenders, a cordon of bunkers honeycombed with mutually supporting positions. Their commanders, Prussian Hauptmänner with iron crosses pinned to Feldgrau tunics, toasting over ersatz coffee at the folly of American Japs storming Gothic line remnants. "Let the yellow horde come," one Oberleutnant scribbled in a diary later seized by Nisei scouts, the words translated under flashlight glow. "Our Spandaus will harvest them like rice in the fields." By October 26th, the Nisei clawed within 500 yards of the pocket, but the final ridge, a knife-edge scar dubbed Suicide Slope for its 60-degree pitch and enfilade from 3 sides, mocked them. German artillery observers, perched in Ausguck concrete perches etched into granite, zeroed the approaches with Zeiss theodolites, calling fire from 150mm siphons that blanketed the draw in high explosive fury, each 19-caliber shell fusing for ground burst to churn soil into lethal slurry. Company L, 3rd Battalion, lost its lieutenant to a sniper's Mauser round through the temple, the man's helmet spinning away like a discarded crown as his radio man screamed coordinates into the SCR 538 set. Medics, burdened with litters and plasma bottles slung from carbines, dashed through the barrage, applying tourniquets with bayonet sheaths while ignoring the Geneva Code's fragile truce. The toll spiraled, 80 dead in 2 days, foxholes filling with the stench of gangrenous limbs amputated by E-tools under morphine haze. Hajiro, eyes burning from cordite and 48 hours sans sleep, confided to Nishimoto during a lull, "They laugh at us, Joe, like we're ghosts, but ghosts can kill." Nishimoto nodded, his Thompson's drum magazine heavy with 100 rounds of hollow point death, the submachine gun's cyclic rate of 600 per minute, a promise of rebuttal. Dawn of October 29th broke in ragged volleys from the 522nd's howitzers, 105mm rounds arcing in a 20-minute crescendo to hammer the ridge's crest, airbursts shredding camouflage nets and flinging MG-42 crews skyward in crimson arcs. Silence fell like an axe, broken only by the patter of settling debris and the guttural curses of wounded grenadiers. Ito rose in the draw, fist raised. "Fix bayonets!" The snick of 16-inch Bowie blades locking to Garand muzzles rippled like a chain of oaths. The Nisei, now 64 in the assault wave, companies Y and K fused in desperation, surging from cover with a roar that split the fog. "Banzai!" Not the imperial shriek of Pacific Isles, but a twisted American thunder, born of internment's chains and hurled at Aryan myth. Ito led, legs churning through 6 inches of glacial muck that sucked boots like quicksand, roots snagging trousers, as if the forest itself resisted. Adrenaline surged, heart rate spiking to 180 beats per minute, vision tunneling to the grey smear of the slope where green tracers lanced down like venom. The German line awoke in frenzy, water-cooled nests raking at 1,200 rounds per minute, shoe mines bounding to waist height before detonating in spheres of 700 steel balls that scythed limbs like wheat. Private Tatsumi Fujita, 18 and fresh from Poston camp, caught a burst square, his body folding in a ragdoll crumple. Garand clattering downslope. But momentum was a beast unleashed. Hajiro, barking 20-round stitches that chewed sandbags to pulp, crested a false crest at 30 yards, vaulting a nest where the gunner, a Bavarian with schnapps breath, fumbled for his Luger. The bar's muzzle flash illuminated the plunge, bayonet grating on sternum, a hot gush slicking Hajiro's hands as the man gurgled defiance. Hand-to-hand devoured the ridge. Nisei Thompsons chattered at groin level, .45 slugs punching through greatcoats. German steel hand granite 43 sticks arced back, one exploding amid a squad to paint ferns red. In a central Ausguck, Oberleutnant Hans Vogel, the diarist whose scorn had fueled Nisei resolve, peered through his slit, chuckling to his radio man, "The monkeys charge blind." The words choked as a grenade from Sergeant Ito, lobbed with baseballer's arm, detonated inside, shrapnel riddling the pair in a lattice of iron confetti. Vogel's aide, a boy from the Rhineland, staggered out clutching eviscerated guts, eyes wide not at death but the yellow demons, bayoneting shadows with feral grace. The charge peaked in savagery, rifle butts splintering Feldgrau helmets, entrenching tools parrying thrusts in grunts of effort, the air thick with the copper reek of blood and the voided bowels' foulness. Okutsu, the wiry corporal from Washington Orchards, shielded his loader from a potato masher blast, shrapnel peppering his back like hornet stings, yet he pressed, Thompson emptying into a knot of grenadiers who broke, screaming, "Asiaten! Rückzug!" By 0900 hours, the ridge was Nisei, 87 assaulters reduced to 37, but the breach yawned wide. Engineers bridged a cratered gully with Bailey trusses under covering fire, while radio men patched through. "Thunderbird, this is Purple Heart. We're linking up." The Texans emerged, beards matted, slapping backs amid shared Chesterfields, their drawls thick with awe. Y'all came like avenging angels. For 211 saved, the 442nd paid 800 lives. A Pyrrhic ledger that silenced bunkers from Belfort to the Rhine. Vogel, dragged rearward with legs pulped, whispered to interrogators. We laughed, until the blades came. Madmen all. The Vosges, witness to shattered lines, echoed no mirth that day, only the grind of history's wheel turning on bayonet points. October 30th, 1944. The blood-soaked flanks of Suicide Slope in the Vosges Mountains, where the fog lifted like a reluctant mourner to reveal a tableau of carnage. Felled pines splintered by 105mm howitzer rounds, foxholes churned to grave pits amid the churned mud, and the low moans of the wounded threading through the crackle of field radios patching victory's ragged edge. Captain William A. Marston, the 100th Battalion's grizzled commander, whose Company B had led the final link-up, knelt beside a makeshift aid station, a tarpaulin strung between saplings, lit by the guttering flame of a Coleman lantern, as medics from the 511th Medical Collecting Company worked feverishly with sulfur powder and morphine syrettes on the human wreckage. Private First Class Barney Hajiro, his bar slung limp across a litter where a corpsman probed the ragged bayonet furrow in his thigh with tweezers and iodine, watched through pain-glazed eyes as Texas survivors of the Lost Battalion, 211 gaunt figures, their field jackets stiff with 5 days' filth, staggered down the ridge, sharing cigarettes and halting words of awe. "You sons of bitches, we owe you our hides." But for the 442nd, the debt cut deeper. 800 casualties in 5 days of inferno, 200 dead, 600 wounded or missing. A butcher's bill several times the rescued etched in after-action reports that would stun 7th Army brass and fuel post-war reckonings. The immediate aftermath was a symphony of exhaustion and erasure. Engineers from the 232nd Combat Engineer Company bulldozed paths through abattis barriers of felled timber, their D8 Caterpillars growling over shoe mine craters, to haul litters on M35 1/2-ton trucks back to field hospitals in Epinal, where surgeons in bloodied aprons raced against gangrene's black tide, amputating toes and limbs with bone saws under ether masks. Sergeant Takeo Ito, his forearm bound in a sling from a glancing steel hand granite 43 fragment, oversaw the burial details. Shallow graves scooped by e-tools under chaplains' prayers, marked with dog tags nailed to pine crosses. Names like Corporal Yukio Okutsu, gut-shot but defiant, whispering, "For the folks," before slipping into shock. Psychological scars festered like untended wounds. Night terrors gripped survivors, replaying the Banzai Charge's frenzy, where bayonets grated on bone, and the copper tang of blood drowned out screams, compounded by the internment ghosts, letters from Hart Mountain camps arriving via V-mail, inked with "Prove us loyal, son." Major General John E. Dahlquist, the architect of this Pyrrhic salvation, arrived by command car that afternoon, his polished Sam Brown belt jangling as he toured the lines, oblivious to the hollow-eyed ranks. "Form up," he bellowed, demanding company fronts for a morale boost. But Company I mustered 12 men, K Company 8, skeletons in olive drab, their go-for-broke patches, mud-caked relics. Ito's squad shuffled into ragged lines, boots squelching, as Dahlquist pinned bronze stars amid flashbulbs from Army Signal Corps photographers, his voice booming, "You Purple Heart warriors saved the division." The irony burned. The Nisei, bled white for a commander's blunder, stood as props in a tableau of triumph, their resentment simmering like foxhole stew, a grudge that would erupt in post-war courts-martial and memoirs branding Dahlquist's order as criminal negligence. Word of the feat cascaded through the chain of command like a shockwave. Major General Alexander M. Patch, 7th Army's steely patriarch, commended Colonel Virgil R. Miller in a field order dated October 31st. "Your regiment's audacity turned encirclement to rout, cracking the Vosges carapace for the Rhine drive." Indeed, the breach propelled the 36th Division forward. Sherman M4 tanks, their 75mm guns traversing ridges, rumbled over Banzai Hill to link with French 12e Division blindé columns, overrunning German fallback lines in the Saverne Gap. The 933rd Grenadier Regiment disintegrated. Survivors like Oberleutnant Hans Vogel, legs pulped and dragged to a stockade in Bifontaine, dictating interrogations laced with awe. We mocked the Asiatic horde until their blades sang like Valkyries, fanatics, worse than Russians. Captured diaries, translated by Nisei linguists wielding pocket English-Japanese glossaries, revealed the laughter's fracture, initial scorn in Ausguck perches yielding to frantic radiograms of unmenschliche Wildheit, inhuman ferocity, as the charge's momentum snowballed, bayonets and Thompsons reaping at point-blank savagery. For the 442nd, reinforcements trickled in, green replacements from Camp Grant, Illinois, their civilian fears traded for Garands, bolstering ranks to 2,500 for the November push to Raon-l'Etape, where Hajiro, invalided but returned, silenced a flak nest with his bar on the 5th, earning the Distinguished Service Cross amid a hail of 8.8mm rounds that cratered the earth like hell's applause. The legacy unfurled in layers, from battlefield ink to national myth. Stateside censors loosened. The Associated Press wired tales of Nisei storm Vosges save 211 Texans, splashed across the Honolulu Star Bulletin on November 10th, igniting cheers in internment barracks where families clustered around Philco radios, tears salting rice balls as they heard of sons charging through the green hell. In Washington, the War Department's Racial Relations Board cited the rescue as Exhibit A in desegregation briefs, countering J. Edgar Hoover's smears of Nisei fifth column risks. Post-war, the honors cascaded. Truman's 1946 parade down San Francisco's Market Street drew 100,000. The 442nd marching with 18,000 decorations, including 1,000 Purple Hearts. But the Medals of Honor waited until 1996, when Clinton's review unearthed 21, including Okutsu's for shielding his squad from a Nebelwerfer barrage on November 29th, his body a bulwark of unyielding flesh. Books like Nisei, The Quiet American, by Bill Hosokawa, and theses dissecting battle command, such as Captain Michael J. Sloniker's analysis of Trust Forged in Fire, immortalized the saga, while Densho's oral histories captured the human grain. Veterans like Fred Shiosaki, recounting the cold's bite and the charge's blur, where fear turned to fury and fury to family. Decades on, the Vosges echoes resound in granite and pilgrimage. The Bifontaine obelisk inscribed, "To the glorious 442nd, from wilderness to Rhine," draws descendants annually, tracing bootprints up Suicide Slope where wildflowers now cloak the scars. The German officer's derision, that brittle chuckle from fog-wreathed bunkers, dissolved in the charge's thunder, a racial jest upended by bayonets proof. Loyalty's blade cuts deepest when whetted by injustice. The 442nd, the Purple Heart Brigade, marched from internment's shadow to history's vanguard, their go-for-broke gamble, not just a rescue, but a reclamation. Etching that in America's ledger, blood answers doubt and valor knows no border of bloodline or bayonet's bite.